God is mercy. God is also justice. We talk a lot about God's mercy. I talk a lot about God's mercy, as well we should, as well I should. A couple weeks ago, we focused on God's relentless pursuit of us. The fact that it doesn't matter what's in the past, it doesn't matter what I've done, God does not and cannot stop loving us. At times, we think maybe he stops loving us, feeling like he's far, far away, or maybe he's forgotten about us. He's grown tired of me for how often I fall, for how often I struggle. But there he is, always there, ready to forgive. God is mercy. And then we have the readings this weekend, referring to the second coming and the end of times. We hear from the prophet Malachi in our first reading, where he has the image. He gives this image of the end of times, and he says, the day is coming, blazing like an oven, when all the proud and all evildoers will be stubble. And the day that is coming will set them on fire, leaving them neither root nor branch. Oh, joy. Terrifying image. Notice what's being stressed here. What's being stressed is that there is no hope for the proud and the evildoers. The branch, the roots will be gone, leaving only a little stubble, of which no future growth is possible. So the proud and the evildoers will receive judgment of hell, of which there's no getting out of. Where's the mercy? But God is also just. I was recently working on a PowerPoint presentation and choosing between a shade of white and black for the background of all the slides, and the little tool that is there with the color scheme of on the right is the black, on the left is the white, and 100% white, 100% black, 100% white. And as you use that tool to toggle from back and forth, the percentage of the black and the white change. As you move this way, the percentages goes up and down of the black and white. You can't have 100% black background and 100% white background at the same time. You got to have one or the other. That does not apply to God. God is 100% mercy and 100% just at the same time. We can sometimes think that God is angry at times over here, and God is, at other times, he's merciful. That's not how it works. That's not who God is. In all his works, God's justice is never without his mercy, and vice versa. His mercy is never without his justice. These attributes of God come to the surface this time of year when the church has us consider the end of times, consider Jesus' coming, and ask us to consider our own death, upon which we will all be judged. And with regards to judgment, with regards to God's justice, I want to look at 3 pitfalls for us to avoid that we often fall into when considering God's judgment and justice. The first pitfall: don't think yourself the judge. Back in the day, it seemed that the emphasis was more on God as punisher. Many people in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s have told me, Father Mark, that they've have this unhealthy understanding of that God is waiting with this guillotine or this anvil, that as soon as they mess up, God's there, bam, ready to pounce. Today, the pendulum has swung all the way to the other side, to where God is 100% mercy and 0% just. That it doesn't really matter what I do. It doesn't really matter how I live, how I act. Even if I don't repent of my sins, God is fine with me. Today's culture does a great job in making God into the judge that we want him to be. And that's easy that way, of course. Why would we not want to do that? When we make God into the judge that we want him to be, it means that I don't have to fight any maybe evil desires that I have. I can just go with it, and it doesn't matter. Because even if I don't repent when I die, it doesn't matter. God is all loving, and he's all merciful. And God is all loving, and he is all merciful, and he's also all just. Only God is perfectly just. He's the only one that knows the human heart. He's the only one that knows what's in the heart. And this comes to the surface with the church's teaching on mortal sin. If one dies in the state of mortal sin, we teach that that person goes to hell. But we don't know when someone's in a state of mortal sin. We don't know their hearts. It's not as if like we notice in this week in the pews being like, well, that person wasn't in the pews last week. They didn't come to Mass last week. They're in a state of mortal sin. Or my neighbor, they never go to Mass. They're in a state of mortal sin. I hope they don't get hit by a bus this week before they have a chance to repent. We can't judge. We don't know the human heart. But God does. He's the only one that knows of the human heart, and he's the only one that can take into account everything that he needs to take into account. And he will judge. And he will judge with perfect mercy and perfect justice. The second pitfall is taking sin too lightly. This time of year is the time of year of first reconciliation of the kids. Yesterday here at Our Lady of Mercy, we had first reconciliations. Kids were here at 9 o'clock. That emptied out at the 9 o'clock. Then another batch of kids, it sounds like they're chickens or something. Another batch at 11 o'clock. First reconciliations for the kids, it's always such a joy. It's so beautiful. Last Wednesday, I was at All Saints Catholic Academy teaching the second graders there on first reconciliation of them making their first confession. And I spent about an hour with them teaching them about the sacrament. And at the end, they asked questions. And one kid asked the question, well, what if you kill someone? If you kill someone, you go to confession, and you're sorry for it, you have sorrow in your heart for it, and you have the intention not to do it, you're forgiven. Well, what if you kill 50 people? If you kill 50 people and you go to confession, and you're sorry in your heart, you have sorrow in your heart, you have contrition, and you have the intention not to do it again, God will forgive you. No questions asked. Well, what if you steal an entire store? And they made it descriptive that he means everything in the store, right? Like the semi takes everything from the store and steals everything. Even if the person steals everything from the store, they have sorrow in their heart. They have the intention to not do it again. God will forgive them. And then you just see in their eyes of another kid just about to say and thinking, well, okay, well, if I go home and bite my sister, then I can just be forgiven. And the teacher noticed, before I noticed, that the kids were beginning to have this unhealthy understanding of taking sin too lightly. They weren't grasping the weight, the consequences, the punishment of sin. And the remedy for that is just to look up here. There's the consequence of sin. There's the punishment of sin. There's the weight of sin. And the beauty of that is that we deserved that. We deserved death. Justice demanded our death. But God, if you will, stood in our place, took the penalty of our death upon himself. And in our baptism, we're justified because of what he did. But as Catholics, we don't believe in once saved, always saved. We can lose our salvation. Darn, right? So therefore, how I continue to live my life matters, to where when I will finally be judged, I have to give an account to how I lived. Absolution takes away sin, but it does not remedy all the disorders caused by sin. And we know this from our own lives. The sin in our lives that we commit towards our loved ones, our family members. Our spouse may forgive us, but it's caused a pain, it's caused a wound, and it has an effect. That's why we do penance. That's why penance is needed. That's why an amends for sin is needed. And that gets into eternal punishment, of which we've been saved from if we repent, but temporal punishment remains. And it gets into purgatory, of which is another homily, and I think you would appreciate not another homily this morning. The third pitfall is living as though your judgment is far off. We're really good, especially here in the West, in America, of putting off the day of reckoning. Thinking that things are always a far ways off, and maybe that I just never have to deal with it, or at least if I hope I won't have to deal with it. We see people live their lives this way. We ourselves live our lives this way at times. The way people spend money, just rack up debt and spend, rack up debt as if to never think that they have to face the consequences of it. Just kicking the can down the road, that hopefully I just never have to deal with it. The way we treat our bodies, what we eat, thinking that maybe we'll never have to deal with the consequences of it. Our boss gives us a presentation to do. A teacher assigns a 10-page paper that's due in 10 months, or 2 months, 1 month. And we walk down the hallways at schools for the whole month and says, hey guys, what's going on? What are we doing tonight? What are we doing this weekend? What's going on? Next thing you know, it's Thursday night. The paper's due the next morning. You're staring at your computer screen, having to write 10 papers. And you're like, how did I get here? Over and over and over again in the scriptures, Jesus, and especially as we'll hear in this month, in these coming weeks, is to be ready. Stay alert, because you don't know when either the second coming will be or our own death. The last 2.5 days, I've been over 5 people on their deathbed. Some of them holding their cross or their rosary, praying and saying literally, I'm ready to go home. I want to go home. As St. Paul in Philippians says, for to me, life is Christ and death is gain. That's the proper perspective of death for a Christian, is that death is gain. The month of November is dedicated, the church dedicates to death, asking us to remember our death, to think about our death. St. Ignatius and the saints encourage us to meditate on our death. So as you and I this month meditate on our death, let us remember that he is 100% mercy. That what he did on the cross saved us. It's at our grasp to turn to and to accept. Even if I struggle, even if I continue to fall, he's there. And that he is 100% mercy. Let it move us to turn to him and repent. And let us also remember that he is 100% just. And he will judge with justice, perfect justice. Let this too move us to repent.